Welcome to the Decentralized Opportunity Podcast. I'm your host, Tanner Lytle, here with your other host,
Wyatt Carson. Hello, Tanner. Welcome back from your vacation.
Thank you.
I'm glad it went well. But niceties aside, I have a very exciting guest I want to introduce today. So I've been working with this person for almost 2 weeks now, trying to get this interview up and going. She's been very patient with me. But our guest is none other than April Pinkie Davis. She's an amazing storyboard artist, social media sensation, horse lover, and even a tattoo artist. And while her name might not be instantly recognizable, I guarantee you everyone who listens to this will be familiar with the work. April has been instrumental in shaping the world of SpongeBob SquarePants as an animator. And man, I'm excited to talk. So hello. Hi, April.
Hi. I'm so glad to finally be on. This is actually a podcast I've been looking really forward to doing and had to go through all the strings of upgrading my internet just so I could be a part of it.
You went through some hoops for us, and I appreciate you.
So I want to jump off. One of the big topics we've talked about in quite a few episodes now is AI. And you have such a unique perspective being an insider in the world of entertainment and all this. And we know like there's strikes that have been happening and all this stuff that's been changing so rapidly with this technology. So the first question I just want to kind of kick off for you to get kind of people jumped in and up to speed is, what is it that most common people on the outside don't understand about AI and this technology and the disruption that it's causing?
Well, most people just see it as like almost like a fun app or generator game that you can plug and play. Just type in something and you receive something. What they don't realize is in order to get that outcome, it's a plagiarism machine where it learns from other people's work consensually or unconsensually. Most AI data mining software is an opt-out, not an opt-in process. So these aren't artists like how you donate your body to science. They're not saying, here, have my work. I'm interested in the progression and study of technology. It's just whatever it's picked off of the internet. And I know there are some AI engines, I don't want to speak for all of them, there are some that are opt-in and not opt-out, but most AI available to the public and what most people are using is opt-out. So you can have artists who have passed away who can't consent to that. You have artists who don't even know this exists. You have artists in the middle of nowhere who barely have internet access except to upload a couple of things on DeviantArt. Or you can have people who are just unaware. Like how could I keep track of something I may have drawn 10 years ago being used to train a software? I produce so much work that I couldn't keep track of what is being stolen, and no one's going to inform me. These programs are the software engineers, whoever is making this, and I'm not super techie, so I'm probably using some of the wrong words, but whoever is working to train these aren't contacting us individually, not saying, hey, guess what? I used the thing you uploaded on Instagram in 2019 to train this machine. Because, I mean, that would be nice if that's how it worked. I'd be like, oh, no, thank you, but that's not how it works. And that's the main issue that artists have and that a lot of people don't understand about how AI is trained.
I love the line you were just saying. It's like, I didn't donate my body to science. So it's almost a true Frankenstein sense. I've been kind of going down the rabbit hole of classic movies and Frankenstein where he's like robbing graves to build this monster. And so it's kind of a neat analogy to kind of play in my head thinking about that.
So, Tanner, maybe you can answer this because I feel April and I might share the sense that we're not very techie people. So are they just using like web crawlers to go through, like you said, DeviantArt, Instagram, whatever, and literally stealing the art and training the system off of it? How are they training AI systems off of other people's work? Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, so they have these, whether it be written databases or image-based databases that they use, I think for like Midjourney and Dali and stuff. There was like different ones like Leon image things, and they're just huge collections. And then some of them were scraped from the internet. Some of them were copyright-free ones. Basically, they just kept accumulating. And under the original license, I believe it was purely for like academic research. And so they had kind of carte blanche, in terms against copyright because they were doing it for academic purposes. But now you have these for-profit entities using these image libraries and these databases for commercial purposes. And so that's really where it's determining. It's like, well, you weren't supposed to use it for this. You said you weren't going to use it for this, but now you're basically are using it.
Yeah,
For
that's
this.
one of the huge issues that artists and a lot of creatives have with AI is that there is no problem using stuff that is copyrighted or someone else's material when you're using it for research purposes. But when it crosses that threshold of now you have these big multi-billion dollar industries like my industry, Hollywood is this just massive bloated pig of other people's labor, and you're adding another step to it. They already pay us so minimally compared to their profit margins, and now they have access to something where they get away with not having to. They already have all of our work. So a studio could pay me like, let's say $1,000 just to make one image, one thing for their social media. This has happened to me before. I've done that for Nickelodeon for holiday stuff. I've drawn SpongeBob characters for Thanksgiving, $1,000. I don't know if that's across the board, but that's usually what it is. Or they could just AI generate it. But that AI stuff could have been off of my own work. So they get out of paying me without my consent. It's like if they just pulled something out of my sketchbook and took it.
And the thing was with this technology too, so for the mass media ones, so let's say like Dolly or Midjourney and stuff, they're built off of these really expansive libraries. But the technology does allow, and what you're probably going to see a lot of issues with in the studio environments is they can build those image library purely off of their own catalogs.
Yeah.
So they can use all of, like Disney, for example, could use all of the history of all the work they've ever done to then regenerate that thing. And I know that's one of the issues that was going on with the strikes, was talking about, for especially writers, if they
Yeah.
can use these predictive text models essentially to build rehash new scripts and stuff as though the writers would have written it using words that they had been written. Is that ethical and is that right?
And some of it is kind of borderline with studios have some things that we've already contributed to years ago. They have things that they may have not used. Like there is stuff in studio databases, especially on the artwork side, that they'll use over and over and over. You can get stock, you could get something from an old episode, and I've already been paid for my work there, and they legally own it, so they can fairly use it. The reuse is very, very common. In fact, when I was on a CG show, a lot of our reuse was props because props are something that you would physically make and model. And we only had budgeted for so many new props in an episode. So most of ours were reused. And the people who made them might not even be on the show anymore, but they got paid. And that's the point. And one of my big arguments with AI isn't the advancement of technology, because that benefits all in a way, but it's when we break it down to what is technology for? Like, what do we want it for as a human race, as a civilization? And my answer is to make life easier or better. And this faction of AI isn't making life easier and better. AI altogether isn't evil. There are a lot of things it can do to help us, but replacing people's creative jobs, there are so many things that could be automated, and they're not creative jobs. Even in Hollywood, there are endless jobs that we could automate, and they're not creative, and those people probably wouldn't like to hear that. And I've had arguments with people online. They're like, oh, well, this is the same thing we told the coal miners. You're obsolete, and we don't need you anymore, and you got to move with technology. And it's like, well, the fact is, entertainment is not obsolete. It never has been. Live sports, music, art, it's never ever been obsolete. There is no replacement. If you want to go lay outside and watch the clouds, then fine, but there's no need to automate something that doesn't need to be automated. There are so many other things that we could be using to advance with this technology.
Well,
So
and
the-
there's such a difference between automation and exploitation, right? Because,
Yeah.
I mean, you think about as technology has made people more productive over time, it's done so to enable them to express themselves or provide value uniquely. This is a different thing that a lot of people oppose because it's using other people's work without the permission residually. Because again, I don't think that people would necessarily have as much of an issue with it if I personally uploaded 1,000 of my drawings and then it could keep, coming up with sketches for me. Everyone would think like that's really cool. But if it takes if I take 1,000 pictures of other people's work and then just make an amalgam of that, then that's where, we're kind of having the issues with.
one of the issues with it is it's also not there yet. It's not advanced enough for us to be able to generate that. And the data is already tainted if it's using other people's work. But my issue with it, with studios using it on my end, is that they don't really understand. They don't understand the process. This is all business people looking at this from a business side of it and not looking at it from me in the pipeline, realizing if you have something, let's say you had AI storyboard an entire episode, I know for a fact that I'm spending way more time fixing everything that is messed up, from sizing issues and inconsistency, and it can't take feedback. So I can't say, hey, the amount of times I get vague feedback from a director that's like, can it be the same but a little bit different? That is so hard to tell a robot to do. And most of my job, I'd say like 90% of it, is throwing ideas out, changing it on the spot, thinking of new things, pitching new ideas. And AI could randomly generate something, but I don't see it doing the same process that I do. What I see is studios implementing it, and then I have to spend way more time fixing something, which is a lot harder than just getting it right from the start.
So I guess I'm looking at this and to play devil's advocate, let's say that, because this is how Tanner and I work. Tanner's an artist and Tanner's very creative, and I work in business. That's what I do. So this is our dichotomy. So to play devil's advocate, what I'm hearing is there's really two arguments to this AI in the artistic world of it. There's the IP argument. This is my intellectual property you are using to train your algorithms and create art for the... That one makes complete sense.
Yeah.
But then there's the second one, which seems much harder to kind of overcome, which is essentially job security. If you removed the intellectual property debate from this, the problem is that these massive bloated companies and corporations are slowly getting the technology to make art, to make video, to make chat, to make almost anything. And it's really displacing so many people. That was a huge piece of the very famous SAG after strikes going on. And I know there's been a recent wonderful update from the writer's perspective, and we can get into that in a bit.
Yeah.
But a big piece of their arguments was, this is what we do. This is what you valued us for many, many years. And suddenly you're just trying to find the technology to replace us. How do you overcome a company who just wants to find cheaper ways to make the same product?
I mean, you can't. That's the issue forever, except for, I mean, we can forever fight back with our unions. And we are more power, and we are the ones who are making the product, is we outnumber any of the men in suits at the top. But at the end of the day, it's like what I said, what is the goal here? And of course, on the business side, you can always say more money, more money, more money, but maybe think of it from the viewer's perspective. What is their goal? I mean, people will sit on their phones and watch hours of live streams of just someone like me just sitting in a house, doing nothing, just talking. Why do they watch that? Why are they entertained by that? It's human connection. It's because that's a real person living their own life, and it's different than mine, and I'm curious about it, and I want to watch it. There's a reason why people watch YouTubers and why they listen to podcasts and why people are interested in independent creation. Is that's what viewers want. That's why you watch movies and shows, is because someone's telling a story. And it's not just, I don't know, if you want to jingle keys in front of someone, fine. But there's a reason why everyone wants to watch things. And if businessmen or studios will never see that, they will never see that. But as far as consumers of the product, people will tell you they like AI. They can tell you they're entertained by it. I think the entertainment is the push to play. It's the amusement that it's curious, it's interesting. This thing is doing something, but it's not sustainable as entertainment forever. You can't replace live sports, live music. You can't replace people's storytelling. You just can't.
And one of the things that's
Fantastic
different,
answer.
one of the things that's different about this, I feel too. So, I originally wanted to be an animator when I was young. I went to school actually for animation, and when I was doing that, was right when the turn from there was 2D animation, and then all the studios got rid of it. So I was getting trained as a 2D animator, and then Disney was like, nope, no more 2D movies.
Yep. Yeah.
And the The change, though, is that in moving to 3D and stuff, you still had animators with a certain amount of fundamentals, and they still
Yeah.
did the work and expressed themselves creatively. This change is completely different because you're actually having the machine do all of the processing
Right.
for you, and then you do a little bit of tweaking. So it's even different than like motion capture and all these other like evolutionary technologies. This one's a replacement one. And I think that's one of the harder things that people are having issues with too,
Yes.
because you have people with no real understanding of the art form creating outputs that they feel are sufficient, that a lot of the public feels that is sufficient and can devalue the work.
And I think there's a lot of lack of understanding of how a lot of that work is created with the public as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And I've been seeing, and Wyatt and I've talked about this a little bit on the podcast. So my wife, she does art as well, and we just last week were at a convention selling art, and a big thing going on in that community too is AI artists. So, well, artists
Yes.
air
Yeah.
quote, where they will just use prompts to generate a lot of anime art specifically
Yeah.
because that's it all kind of looks like anyway on
Hmm.
the like what sells, and so you can use Midjourney and generate very voluptuous, scantily clad women and print them on 18 by 24 and try to sell them for 30, $40 a piece and people buy it.
Yeah.
But again, going back to like, they don't have then any understanding of drawing. They don't have any understanding of
Right.
composition, of anatomy, or any of those pieces. It's not like, oh, I draw with a pencil and now I draw with a Wacom tablet. It's,
Yeah.
I just type in some lewd things and knee G5 and hit press and repeat until I find some things that I
And
like
I
and
mean,
print it out.
to be fair for that consumer, I don't really think they're looking for composition. I think they're looking for boobs. So if that's what
100%.
sells, that's what sells. But I actually, before I worked in animation, how I made my money was I worked at conventions. I boothed and I went from state to state and I sold my art and I was guest of honor at some conventions. I did that whole like starving artist nomad lifestyle. But the one thing with conventions that I really liked was that human connection, and that's what people liked too. Is I don't think if I just put my art on a table, you'd get a few people that would buy it, but I don't think I'd come home with thousands of dollars if it wasn't for the fact that people wanted to come up and talk to me and ask me questions or just learn about where I even came from, where I drove from, what hotel I'm staying at, what have I been doing lately, just chatting. And it's that human connection that we'll always go back to. And I think a lot of the appeal of AI is just, it's, I don't know the right word for it, like niche. It's just interesting right now, but I don't think it's sustainable because that is what people take from this. It's like there's a reason why you go to a convention and you're not ordering that anime girl print online, whether or not it was the person at the booth who made it. They're going there for human connection. They want to talk to someone. They want to be like, I want this lady because I think she's hot. And then the seller could be like, yeah, she's hot. Okay, give me $40. That's what people go for, is to interact and connect with other humans.
Absolutely.
So I don't disagree with anything you guys are saying. I can't really speak the art lingo. I've heard some words out there just way over my. But so I think one of the big questions, though, at least from my perspective, is AI is here. It is never going to go away, and it is going to get exponentially better. And just
Yes.
the rate of change, the rate of learning, the very first AI product that was pushed out a couple years ago is grossly obsolete now because it's already so much better. And this
Yeah.
time next year, it's going to be exponentially better. So let's talk animators specifically. How do you think animators as a profession should approach this and honestly prepare, because this could be a paradigm shifting technology for you? What does your profession need to do to kind of steel themselves against this? Is it work with it? Is it, protest against it? How do you view this going in the near future?
So my union, I'm part of IATSE, which is the parent union of what I'm in, the Animation Guild, which is Local 839, and they have an AI task force, and I know that's a huge thing that they're working on because our negotiations come up in July. And for people who don't understand unions and how this works, because people always say, why can't you all strike now? The writers and actors are striking, is because we have these negotiations that we sign with these studios saying, we agree that we won't strike until we get the chance to meet at the negotiating table and decide what our plans are. And if you say no and we're not happy with it, then we can strike. So we have signed documents that say that we can't. And right now, one of the huge things we have to address, especially in the visual medium, is AI. And I was shocked to find out that the actors have the same issue too, because I knew the writers, the chat GPT and stuff similar, like Cleverbot way back in the day, that's been around forever, like type-based AI. But I had no clue they were advanced enough to be able to scan an actor's likeness. Now, this is something SAG is fighting right now, and be able to use that actor in any amount of films with or without their consent. I had no clue we were even there. So what I'm seeing from like Midjourney and everything that we're seeing that the general public has access to, I have no clue what the people with the billions and billions of dollars, I'd say people, but I mean corporations with the billions of dollars, what they have access to. So, and I go to the union meetings, but I have no clue what some of the leadership has to talk about, and we don't really sit down until next summer. But the hope that I have for this is seeing what the writers were able to win is huge, especially just the disclosure that the show that you're about to be working on is going to use AI. I could see that not being staffed up. I could see nobody wanting to partake in that. So I think that the writers, and this is not an over exaggeration, I really think they saved our entire industry. I think they saved Hollywood. I can't believe they were able to get that far. And it gives me, and I know a lot of other unions and a lot of other union members, a lot of hope that we can fight for that, because the general understanding is this stuff is bigger than us, and it really isn't, because you can't replace the people that you're training the thing off of, and you can't replace genuine human creation. You just can't. So I don't really know how we're going to fight it, but I know we are.
That's great.
Yeah, in terms of what technology is possible, just recently on the Lex Friedman podcast, he interviewed Mark Zuckerberg, and they did it all in the metaverse. And so the
Oh,
metaverse
interesting.
was quite a meme, recently, and it
Yeah.
looked like cartoons and terrible.
Uh-huh.
In this new version, they did 3D scans of themselves, and it looked photorealistic. And he said it
Weird.
was the most surreal thing because it felt like he was sitting right across from him, almost too closely. They had to like calibrate it so it was sitting a little further back.
Weird.
But it's incredibly photorealistic. And then I saw someone who works at Meta posted and said, "We've been working on this since 2019 at this
Yeah.
level." So whatever we're seeing now in terms of like capabilities for like ChatGPT or Midjourney, Dolly, or these metaverse things, we're probably actually like 9 to 24 months behind them, which is pretty
Yeah.
crazy too. So when you think about your, different industries and different people planning ahead for what kind of businesses they want to create or what kind of contracts they want to negotiate, you really have to almost over
Yeah, exactly.
go because you don't have a clue what you're really facing.
Yeah, that's one of the big issues, that our contract negotiations only last so long. And that's something that we have to be prepared for. And we had a lot of issues with that with something called new media. And it's something we've struggled with since the writer's strike in 2008. They were fighting against new media, which is streaming. And I can't believe we still call it new media, because it's not. It's the media. That's how we consume things now, is streaming. But studios are so behind, and Hollywood is so old, that the reason why TV pays less than film goes all the way back to like the golden era of television. The reason why some forms of media are viewed as lesser than others is just rooted in what it used to be. Like streaming is seen as it pays less because it's new experimental media. That's what was in our contracts. That's what studios agreed upon to call it. And now it's dominating the market, and we're still calling it new media because that's what we agreed upon. And there was no clause or anything in there that says, hey, just in case this thing takes over the whole world. And when do we stop calling it new media? When do we start paying people the same as we'd pay them for film? Like, the reason why film pays more is because that's what got people in seats and more eyes on it. That was the big thing. Like, this was back in the golden era of television. And I can't remember the numbers, but like in the 40s and 50s, like very, very few homes had TVs in them. And I think like, I have it written down somewhere. It was like I'll find it. But golden era of television. Okay, 1947 to 1960. 8,000 households had TVs in 1946, and then 45.7 million had TVs in them by 1960. That's a huge leap in a small amount of time, but television since then has always been viewed as lesser, as far as the eyes of things being paid, not by the viewers, of course, because viewers have always valued TV, streaming, whatever is the next new thing, it doesn't matter. But studios will still look back at our old contracts, our old agreements, and say, listen, TV writers make less than film writers. Because why? Because, I don't know, in the 1960s, that's how it was. And that's how it will remain. And that's why we have to keep fighting it, because they will hold on to that, those ancient agreements that we had, just because why would they update it? They're not interested in fairness.
Right. So the writers came to an agreement recently, and I was trying to find the list. I couldn't find the list right now, but they came out with some really amazing wins out of it. Honestly, minimum writers, additional pay
minimum.
depending on scaling, staffing minimums, all of this cool stuff. But they also won some assurances against AI, and I'm not intimately familiar with those, but this has to be like a shining light for you.
Yeah, it is.
If the writers can do it, it's possible, right? And what I was alluding at with my original question of how do you combat corporations who just want to get awesome stuff for cheap, the answer is what the writers just did, right? They assured themselves better pay, better positions, protections against AI. And was it painful? Oh, I can only imagine how painful it was. But this has to be a bright, shining light for you and your profession, right? Because it sounds like it would be very easy to say, well, if AI can do it, who cares? And that is a very, detached perspective. It sounds like something someone in a C-suite level in a nice suit would say. But we just proved that you can do it, and that's got to be awesome, right?
Yeah, and also huge win, I was just mentioning new media, is their residual payments. And residuals are something you make as episodes keep airing, and how successful a show is, you get a little bit of a stipend of it. And it's not phenomenal. And the reason why this helps people a lot is because, and a lot of people's misunderstanding with a lot of our union issues is they see us as like, you could look up how much money I make. It's union stuff, it's public, it should be public information. You can look up what minimums, I mean, a storyboard artist, a director would make on whatever production. You could even look it down to the studio. But the problem is we don't stay on those jobs long. Like if you're looking at it where the average storyboard artist and director makes like 2,000 to 4,000 a week in TV animation, that's not guaranteed. We always hiatus, no matter what. You'll have an entire month with no pay, and it usually falls around Christmas, and it sucks. And you could go without work for months and months because they'll only sign you on for, if you're lucky, you can get a 1-year contract, but sometimes you're only working on per project, and then you drop off, and then you're unemployed for another 5 or 6 months. So in the grand scheme of things, it looks like actors and writers and animators make a shit ton of money because it's Hollywood and they're these big numbers, and you think these are extremely wealthy people. And my argument forever has been, go to LA, go to any restaurant, and ask any waiter what they do. Not in the restaurant, what do you do? And they're going to tell you, I'm an actor, I'm a writer. They'll tell you that's every single person in LA. So those residuals are so important for people to be able to make their living, to be able to afford their groceries, just basic things. And streaming was not giving us that, and that's where media went. So as the industry got richer, we all have gotten poorer. And that's been a huge thing that we were able to win, because in 2008, the writers tried and didn't really make big leads or strides towards that. So this and the AI wins that the writers made just from striking this year are huge steps that have put a lot of hope in us, especially because the last strikes and the last negotiations we've settled for things that have screwed us over in the end. Like, I'm not happy with what we settled for last time with the Animation Guild, but it's what we got, and I just understood this. You get what you get, whatever. But they have so much money, and we're more important than we think we are, or know we are sometimes.
So, as an animator, are you more of an independent contractor who contracts out then to each studio, each assignment, or how does that actually work for you?
I have been both. So I've been like a full-time employee but every single year I still have a 1-year contract and then it gets renewed every year. So even though you're a full-time employee, nothing is forever. And right now I'm working more as a contractor because there's not a lot of shows in production. There's really not anything I could jump to. Most animation people work kind of as contractors. I know people who will work for like 10 different studios in a year, and that's just normal. Like they're like, okay, I'm at Warner Brothers. Okay, what next? And you see people's posts on Twitter. You're like, oh, I'm at Warner Brothers now. Okay, pop over and say hi. And they're like, oh, nope, sorry, I don't work for them anymore. And it just like it goes so rapid fire, which is kind of cool to be able to dip your toes in so many things, but it's really not sustainable. And it does kind of suck. Like I just during these strikes when there's nothing in production, you realize the reach of some of the things you make. I was on a United flight home to California, NorCal, where my parents are, that my parents paid for the ticket for my birthday because I had no money. And I was sitting on the flight watching the screen in front of me, and it was looping in-flight entertainment. And I'm watching things that I drew on the screen. And I'm like, what a kick in the dick to see my own work just like looped in front of me. So it's just the reach you get versus what you get for it is just, it's not sustainable anymore at all.
That's a really fair point. You think about you created something and this company can take it and use it a million bajillion different ways, he's in flight, on the back of an airplane seat or whatever, which by the way, I'm sure that was a cool moment for you, but also
It was frustrating in that I feel like if I was
Yeah.
like steadily employed at the time, I'd be like, oh cool, I'd take a picture and post it
There
on
you
Twitter,
go.
but
That's
it was
it.
definitely like kind of like in your face in that moment.
Because I think within the United States, read some recent metric that like the average CEO is making like 430 times more
Yes.
than your starting employee. And I
Yes.
seriously doubt entertainment's any different, if not probably much worse, really.
Yeah, there used to be, and I used to have that number memorized, but it was like back in the day, CEOs would make so much times their lowest paid employee, and it used to be like something like 30 times. And I'm just throwing that out there. I think it's pretty close, and now it is what you said, 400 times what their lowest paid employee is, and like going back to these independent contractors, you think that the person who worked for like Warner Brothers and Fox and Disney all in the same year is probably like, from an outside perspective, you're like, that must be the coolest, richest person in the world. Especially if you worked on like all these big names. It's like I have friends who'll go from like, yeah, I worked on The Simpsons and Rick and Morty this year, and you're like, whoa, you must be the coolest dude ever. That's just your average animation person. It really is. Like, if you're in the industry, you're used to hearing that stuff. If I tell someone else outside of the industry, you'd probably think it's like that person is so rich and successful and cool, and they're probably just, living paycheck to paycheck, making ends meet like everyone else.
It's a really good perspective. Honestly, I can't think I probably, outside of talking to you, kind of would assume the same thing.
Yeah.
So, hey, thanks for sharing that.
I think it was for the Screen Actors Guild or something. It was some ridiculously high percentage, like 60% or more of the members, maybe even higher.
Yes.
Because it could have been like an 80-20 rule thing, only made a few $1,000s a year. Like
Yeah.
barely made enough to pay their dues. And
Yeah.
it's crazy how little that you can make, like how many people who want to be in on this, try to get there, try to make a living and stuff. And then the small percentage of people who can even just make a livable wage, let alone something that's like a movie star or anything that's going to get you rich.
Yeah, and I think it was like, I don't want to throw out wrong numbers, but I think it's like 60% made 25K a year. And that's what I said earlier about like, go anywhere in LA, go to a restaurant and ask your waiter what they do. And most of the time it will probably be an actor. And you can even ask them if they're SAG. Like go through the McDonald's drive-through and ask the person taking your order if they're SAG. A very normal, common thing in LA. That's the entire workforce that people... and what I love about LA is people hustle. Like it's not suffering. There's no complaints. It's, well, I gotta make ends meet. I gotta go on to the next thing to be able to pay my bills. So when people saw, I shared something that Aaron Paul said, I make nothing on Breaking Bad on streaming. And people are like, oh, he doesn't need to. He makes so much money. He has so much money. He made so much when Breaking Bad aired. And I shared that because I'm like, this is a household name saying that he makes nothing on one of the most popular streamed things that you could imagine. And if he's not getting any residuals, any payment, what do you think the rest of us are getting? Like the point of sharing that isn't that, oh, poor Aaron Paul, he must be so poor and have to live out of his car like the rest of us. He has to eat McDonald's and ramen noodles for every meal. That's not the point. It's if you know who he is, you don't like my name isn't a household name. What do you think the rest of us are getting? And like for the record, animation people don't get residuals. We never have. Our writers don't. We don't. None of us get residuals. And if he's not, imagine what the rest of SAG is getting. Imagine someone like you're a background actor in, let's say, for argument, like Breaking Bad, and he's the star, but you're in that scene. You're in some of the big parts of Breaking Bad, and this is something people watch over and over and over again. Like, what do you think your life looks like? You're probably waiting tables. That's what it is.
Wow. Well, if it makes you feel any better, this won't make you feel better. That was leading question. While you were doing that, I had to Google this, the current salary of the CEO of Warner Brothers. So
Zaslav?
Zaslav, you know him. As of last year,
250 million, right? A year?
Spot on. 246.6. Well, you done your research.
Oh, I remember it.
I bet. But now you're saying animators and writers don't even get residuals. Also didn't realize that. But here we are.
So writers in my union.
In your animation unit.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No. So, well, we know where the money's going now, don't we?
Yeah. Oh, we've all known, and that's why I could spout off that number off the top of my head.
That was spot on.
Yeah, he's one of the most high paid in the industry. And imagine like what it would take to spend that money like in your entire lifetime. What could you do with that? And at this point, like people say, well, what's the point? He's already like living in his means. What do any of these CEOs do? And the thing is, they're not seeing this as income like the rest of us. It's a numbers game. It's like a scoreboard. It's a leaderboard for the rest of them. So if he's making $250 million and he's looking at another CEO like Iger or something, and I think Iger is less than him, but I can't think off the top of my head what I'm sure you can look it up, what he's making. And he says, look, Iger, I make this much more than you. He's better. Like in their world, he's better. It's not about what you do or who you are or what you create in the world. It's a leaderboard. It's a video game.
Yeah, and just for reference, Iger is the CEO of Walt Disney,
yes,
currently making about $45.9 million a year. But that's just like a paycheck. We're not talking options and all of the other perks that come with that, right? So you're spot on. Zaslav is grossly higher than everyone else, but you're right. It's a game between a crowd, and we're not invited, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know the gaming industry has the exact same issue. The Activision and all those, which are going through those billion-dollar acquisitions with Microsoft and all that, are trying to get these big paydays. But my thought is, with both movie industry, I think TV do a lot of part, and I know for sure with video games, they are becoming more and more risk adverse because things are becoming so much more costly to produce. So they're making the same Call of Duties, they're making the same Marvel movies. And there's the 15th season of Yellowstone with the 20th spin-off of it or whatever that's coming up. But with this new technology, I'm curious, it enables people to produce more themselves. So how can this be disruptive for a positive sense where you could potentially leave the studio game and kind of go off and produce something of value to an audience yourself? And could that potentially be a way of, changing things for the better?
Well, it is and it isn't, because we already use stuff like AI in all of our art software. There's things like And I'm sure I don't know how programming works, but I'm sure there is some form of AI and this is going to get really meta complicated for people who don't understand what I do. But every time I draw something in a storyboard, I press a button and it auto mats it. And matte is like the white that'll go behind the character, so it's not just lines so you see through them and see the background. And I'm sure that there is some level of AI understanding of where my lines begin and end and what the image is and what the background is, and then like to outline it and generate that. And that does make my life easier because I don't have to do another thing. It makes it so I can focus on I make better storyboards that way. I don't have to waste one whole day adding white mats to the back of every drawing. I could add more drawings. I could add funnier gags. I could make or write a better idea. It does make my life better. There is levels of AI in pretty much every animation software that there is, and we use them. There's like in CG, and I'm not a CG animator, I've worked on CG shows, but there are certain like automatic tweens, and again, this is getting really complicated animaty, but tweens are in-betweens where you will have point A and point B of one pose to another. So it would be like if someone was doing the robot and their arms were in one position, and then their arms were in this position. Well, you can't just flip back and forth between those. When I'm doing this, you're seeing my arm come down and things move. And those are in-betweens. And there are some softwares that AI generate an autofill in-betweens or snap poses smoothly to other poses. Like editing software does that. It transitions things smoothly and nicely. There's a level of AI that can be implemented in every single workforce. But you're talking about all these IPs and spin-offs and demands for that. There's also no lack of talent. There is no lack of people who can produce that and be paid to produce that and make a living doing that. And they aren't hurting for money. There is this one of our union members, I think he was WGA, he did a Venn diagram, no, not a Venn diagram, pie diagram of how much money studios have versus how much they give to our unions. And the argument studios make is like, if we give you a slice of the pie, we got to give everyone else a slice of the pie, like we're all just like greedy siblings fighting over something. And they're like, so if we give something to WGA, we got to give it to SAG. We give something to SAG, we got to give it to IATSE. And then Teamsters, who drive all of our trucks for all of our productions, we got to give them a slice too, and now we have no money. Well, you look at the whole pie, and this was like, I don't remember the colors, but I think like the whole pie is like red. It's like, this is studio money. And then all of us, all together, all of our slices are like the tiniest little like thin black line on that whole red pie. And he's like, well, let's zoom in, because he did it all in Excel. This isn't just like him making up numbers. He's like, I put in all these numbers in Excel. And he's like, Excel can't even like process how much, like I had to kind of fill, like this line does not even really show up in Excel. And if you zoom in, that tiny thin little line is all the slices that we are. So there is like AI could help us in a way, but there is just no lack of people that can do this, and there is no shortage of money that can pay us. Like when I tell people this, it's like every CEO and every studio would love to whine and cry and moan about budgets and how much everything costs, and this is going to cost us so much, and everything's going to be a loss, and if this show doesn't do good, it's a loss. And Hollywood is the industry. It's huge. All of us partake in it. Everyone gets home off of work and watches something. It might not be something I work on. It's just something, anything at all. Turn on the TV, it's something that someone made. So it dominates outside of the United States market. You have people getting off work in the UK, in Canada, watching American-made filmed shows. And they have their own markets too. And some of them even are outsourced work for us. There is just no shortage of entertainment, and there's no shortage of people that make it. And the people that make it are so small and compared to the people that watch it. So there's no need to automate it. There's so much that would help us. But again, it's like the things that need to be automated are creative. It's the things like filling in those mats for me or in betweening shots, things that make my job easier for me to do so I can have the freedom to be more creative.
But do you see, what I was asking too is, could you disrupt that pie? I mean, to do something, do you see smaller teams yourself not needing the larger studio support environment because a lot of these tools are now automated? Audiences are on different platforms, such as like YouTube or I don't know I'm sure it's very challenging to get onto streaming platforms, to get whatever
Mhm.
product you have, but there is a lot of ones that are still available to create things holistically yourself instead. I mean, I'm more entrepreneurial than most, I feel, to where I'm like, well, if it's not going to work for me, I'll just go do it on my own. And this one
Uh-huh.
of the things that excite me about a lot of this technology is now that it's starting to give the capacity for one person to a small team to have the same output a few years ago of somebody that was a medium-sized team to a large organization. So what are your
Well,
thoughts there?
I mean, I still kind of have the same argument. Like, you could be a one person director and have vision and be able to execute things, and you could automate different parts of that job. Like, right now, I'm working on something where I am making all these shorts for a studio, and I am writing, directing, animating, doing it all, except I've hired some voice actors for it, and then they produce it and release it. So I'm actually currently doing that kind of one man show, but I don't want to say that because I do have other people. I do have my voice actors. So I I understand that to an extent. There are processes that I could see automating, but I like from my perspective, if I automated like what I'm doing right now, I just can't see it being the outcome I want. And I think any good director would want to have control over every aspect of that, even if it's someone else doing it, obviously. But I don't feel like you have that sense of control really with AI, at least yet. And I could see that being a possibility if it's done ethically. And right now it isn't. And I have no problem with that. Like, I have no problem with things being a little bit more automated. I don't think that I'd enjoy every aspect of your product. Like, if you are writing something and you think it's a really good story and you have something automated, I'm not going to love every animated choice, or I'm not going to love every choice in the background. I mean, that's anything, because everybody's going to have an opinion about something. But I think it does take some soul out of it. Even I feel like you're sacrificing something when you're automating it. Just if that's what product helps you get out, sure, but that's not how studios are seeing it, at least at this point.
And I think to add on, Tanner, your question is, if, like you said, this is very much your personality, Tanner. If it's not working for you, I'll go do it myself.
Yeah.
It sounds great in theory, but as April just said, like, you've got to realize the juggernaut that is Hollywood. They are the industry globally, really. Everyone in every country watches stuff made in Hollywood. So, well, and I think the independent studios and stuff like that are gaining more traction. I think, I certainly don't want to speak for anyone in Hollywood because I don't freaking know, but writers just proved that they can make a stand, put pain on the industry, and gain something from that. And I think ensuring protections from AI, getting those additional residuals, minimum staffing for shows, that sort of thing. I think we've proven that it's probably a lot scarier for everyone to be like, well, screw you, Hollywood, I'm making my own shows, right? That
Yeah.
sounds like an
Well, I mean, you
insurmountable
can,
task.
but
You can,
uh,
sure.
one of the arguments that people are like, why doesn't everyone just go indie? Because indie animation's big, it's successful. I've worked in indie before. Everyone in Hollywood makes their own things. Like, some
Sure.
people don't have the time to, but like even like the actors I talk about who are waiting tables, they're off like filming their own things for who knows, just their TikTok or something. Everybody's doing their own content or whatever, because if you're in this industry, you got in it by doing stuff that fulfills you before you started to be bled dry by these studios for IPs. So it's like, yeah, everyone has their own thing. But when people say, well, why doesn't everyone just go indie? Where do you think the money comes from? How do I pay my bills? My argument always is like, why aren't all animators indie? And I say healthcare. I like having healthcare. That's why I like working in a union, because I have certain protections with that union. And I could live a good life off of studio money. And I live an okay life off of studio money. It could be better. But and I would be happy to do indie stuff if I allot myself the time as well. I'd be happy to make all of my own things. And through doing some of this stuff where I'm working on these shorts right now has showed me, oh, this is a time frame where I could do everything myself. This is how long it would take for me to make backgrounds and animate it myself. And this is how long for me to work with voice actors. And in that sense, I could do a Kickstarter and work on stuff too. But I feel like the beast isn't individuals making stuff with AI and making their own things, because like at the end of the day, who cares? It barely hurts anyone. But and especially if it was stuff trained off of your own things, like if that's what works for you, good. Because the amount of times I've reused poses that I've already drawn, I've reused so many of my own things in the reused ideas in different episodes. The reuse is very common in what we do, because that's otherwise you would have absolutely no time to yourself. So I really don't see anything entirely wrong with that, and there are ways to go about it. I don't think that it yields the best product at this point, though.
Yeah, I love that answer. One of the things that I've been going through a lot, especially as I'm getting older and have a family and different things, it's what do you tolerate for risk? So you brought up
Yeah.
like healthcare and different things like that, and that's been
Mhm.
a huge motivator for me on what I do for in the day to day for work and all that stuff. And one of the things that originally like kind of got me away from wanting to take an animation path was it moving away from like the old studio environment. I used to love or I still do love the documentary Frank and Ollie, with the nine grumpy old men,
Yeah.
and they lived their entire lives in that studio. Like
Yeah.
they had a career from right when they finished up in art school all the way until they were in their 90s or whatever. They worked there, and all of that was going away from you being like a long-term employee, moving
Yes.
yourself through the ranks into those freelance things. And you want an environment that is something to where you can have longevity, where you can have stability, where you could raise a family. And anymore as it goes to more that rogue nomad independent contractor type thing, you lose a lot of that stability.
Very, very few people have that security. Like when I started on SpongeBob, one of my first directors I worked with, Dave, was telling me like he had been on SpongeBob for I think 15 years, which is actually like small because there are some people who had been on the show since its birth. But his kids, like he said, they know nothing else. They think animation is stable because their entire lives I've raised them off of my money, my paychecks, and bought a house, and him and his wife and his two kids live comfortably. But he's like, they have no clue. And there was one time where like SpongeBob hiatus pretty hard, and a lot of the crew had to move on to Shimmer and Shine, which is like some girly like preschool show. And that was kind of the studio to give them some stability. And sometimes studios will do that. They will hold on to like, this is good talent. We're gonna put you on anything to keep you from going to someone else because we need you, especially SpongeBob, because it's such a huge IP that a lot of studios don't treat their employees that same way unless you are on a massive IP like that. We're like, we need to hold on to this talent because we can't get SpongeBob talent anywhere else but SpongeBob. So they would grapple onto that. And like he's been lucky to have job security, and I did on SpongeBob for like 5 or 6 years, and then I jumped on to a spin-off show, and then it got canceled, and I went to move back onto the main shows, and they staffed up and there was no room. But if I stayed on it forever, I could have that security because it's such a huge IP and I don't see it going away. But there's so few shows. Like I'm thinking of like SpongeBob, South Park, Simpsons, Family Guy, maybe like American Dad are ones that have held on to employees and given them some job security. But it's not just the studios wanting to hold on to people. Some of it's just like higher up. They will just end shows without giving them a chance and then write it off as a tax write-off. Just kill shows. And that's even good shows that people love. I mean, when the show I was on that spiraled into a lot of unemployment for me, when it got canned, it was like number 2 for kids shows. Doesn't matter. They canned it anyways. So I understand that there is very little sense of job security, especially now. And what you're talking about with the 9 old men, that has not existed in ages. And the great thing about my industry is we grow and adapt. Like we're talking about AI, we could learn to grow and adapt with it if it wasn't presented the way it is. Like, we grew and adapt with change of technology from paper to Cintiqs. Software is always changing. Like, one of my frustrations is, I think Toon Boom, which is what makes Storyboard Pro, was bought by another company, and I'm like, oh man, they're gonna fucking change everything, and my whole life's gonna suck, because if one button's different, my whole life is ruined, because it changes my entire, like, it changes how fast I work, because it's so muscle memory. I'm pressing everything, and like A and F are to flip between frames. If something like that changed and didn't allow me to edit the hotkeys, then I'd be screwed. Like, I'd at least have a couple of weeks of very slow, grueling work. Photoshop actually implemented a new AI function, and it made the whole thing run like crap. And I've been using Photoshop since I was 13. It made the whole thing terrible and different.
I have a lot of artist friends still using, I think, CS2 for that reason.
Oh,
because
yeah.
they
That was
before
my
they went
first
to
one.
the yeah, because that one you can still use offline, and you could still have your perpetual license with
Yeah.
or something, or maybe it was CS3.
No,
But
it's
now that they're
CS2.
on,
It was like that one's like the 90s one or whatever. That's the one I started drawing on, and
yeah,
people still use that.
yeah, because if you're on Creative Cloud now, they update it all the time, and like you're saying, if you
Yeah.
have a rhythm and a muscle memory, and it's all about time and time equals money, all of a sudden you get the latest Creative Cloud patch, and then it'll just completely wreck you.
Yeah,
Or
we all have to
yeah,
adapt and change with this technology. Like, studios will be like, "Hey, this happens to Storyboard Pro all the time. They're like, just so you know, all the other board artists are on version 20 and you're on version 8." And I've had that happen so many times in studios. I'm like, "Okay, what about it?" Sorry, I feel bad for them, I guess. And they're like, no, you need to be on a different version because now your file is different. I'm like, can't you convert it or something? I'm like, no, it's your problem because you're the issue, and now you have to change it. And so it's like, that's something like we're constantly growing and adapting. And that's a lot of things people don't realize about the complaints with AI. They're like, oh, well, it's the coal mining argument that someone made on my Facebook page. It's like, oh, we told the coal miners it's time to adapt and grow, and this is how the world is. It's like, yeah, but it's like, we adapt and grow all the time. You just don't see it. You don't realize it. It's not like technology isn't constantly replacing our workflow, because I think it happens like every couple of months, every time there's a new software update or change or something.
yeah, I've been in so many production environments on the IT side where it's like you never do like a Windows update like before a deadline or anything like that, because inevitably it will crash everyone's machine
Yeah.
and put you off time. And yeah, it's just all those little things you don't even think about.
Yeah, and every production has their own thing. Like, there's just different software where you upload everything, and that sounds easy and simple, like a Google Drive. But each one has their own. Like, these are massive studio files with folders and folders within folders, and like their entire systems that us workers have access to. And they're like, we're all doing this in Shotgun, and you're not, and like you have to know this program. It's insane that each studio you go to is something different. Like, no, we're on Media Shuttle, and I've worked with different studios, and they kind of like, you jump on a production and you're like, okay, I uploaded it, and they're like, yeah, but you didn't upload it this way, and you should know that. I'm like, oh, great. So there's constant adaptation all the time. I mean, I tell people, I'm like, this is a weird thing about my job, is it doesn't exist like it exists in a computer. It's not real. Like, if the internet and technology and everything disappeared tomorrow, I'd still have the drawing skills, but like the shows I make is all within, like, everything I do is sitting in front of a computer and pushing buttons and drawing. It's really weird. It's like, I think people don't realize how much tech actually assists us and handicaps us, and how much it changes, and we have to adapt all the time in what I do.
So, April, I want to kind of shift gears just a little bit.
Yeah.
Appreciate your time. First off, you mentioned Shimmer and Shine. I'm the father of 4 daughters.
Oh,
I've seen
okay.
Shimmer and Shine in my life. So my ears perked up. I was like, oh, I've seen that.
I thought you were
show.
you were like Googling it or something when I saw you like
Oh
perk
no,
up on
I'm
that. You're
well
like, oh, what
familiar
is
with
that?
it. Oh no, but so I want so y- let's talk about social media a little bit real quick. So you are big on social media. I remember sitting in the pandemic and my wife showing me videos of you, and they're like, oh, look at this horse, and I'm like, okay, whatever. And then but
Yeah.
regardless, I'm not here to talk about horses, although I love them. but your content is starting to morph a little bit, and one of the reasons you so graciously agreed to be on our podcast is because you wanted to talk about these issues, and you're utilizing that audience. In the last hour of us talking, I have learned so much about animators, and I feel so many people have no idea how this industry
Yeah.
works. They just assume people are drawing pictures and they put them in a computer and they
Yeah.
make a ton of money, and it's all that's not it. What are you hoping to see in the near future? I won't even give you a deadline. In the near future for animators, your profession, what are you hoping to see come out of some of the strife that Hollywood's been seeing? And you mentioned, your union goes into contracts, you say July, I think.
Yeah.
What are you hoping in the near future will help drive your profession to be a bit more secure and fair? What if you were in charge and you could write this, what would it be?
Well, one thing, also tying in your social media point, is I really got into like Hollywood labor actions and talking more about what I do instead of just showing the product, because I was always really proud of my work and I wanted to show it to people. But then as the years have gone by and things have gotten more and more complex, and how much I have seen pushback from the general public, like I said, people saying these are just all rich people in LA complaining, it really showed me how little the outside world understands. And from like a rural standpoint, and I hang out with a lot of cowboys, they don't understand it, and I understand they don't understand it, because those people don't understand anything unless it's like blue collar work, unless you're also training horses, which I do, but it's like unless you're doing that, they don't get it. So, but then I realized the rest of the public just doesn't get it. And one thing I really want for my industry is for us to be less behind the scenes and valued as everyone else in entertainment. Like, writers aren't seen. You don't know them by their face. You might not even know them by their names, but they are way more vocal and way more out there. And I think some of the crutch of my industry is, in order to get really good at art, is you get a lot of very socially awkward, introverted people. And that's the problem with, like, when I started doing stuff on social media and I started doing more interviews, people were always picking me. And I'm like, why me? Because I know I'm not like the face. I have like face and neck tattoos. So it's like, I know I'm not the person for this stuff, but why? It's because I was outgoing and willing to talk to people, and I'm extroverted. And I know there's more of us in my industry, but I would like it to be more personable. And I would like people to see us on the same level, not just like cog in the machine churning this stuff out, but I would like people to see us as people and as entertainers, because like what I do, it's writing, it's acting, and it's drawing, and I direct things. It's just, there's so much in what I do. Like, there's a cinematography level to it. Like, I decide where the camera is. There is so much I do that is just not just drawing cartoons, and I don't think a lot of people realize that. And I don't think people realize like the sheer amount of talent, and how like people who are big in my industry, like there's famous animators, they're only famous to other animators, but they're amazing, talented people, and we all recognize what they do, but the rest of the public doesn't, because it's like, yeah, it's another guy who draws cartoons. You're like, no, this guy's phenomenal. And you're like, yeah, but he draws cartoons, and you draw cartoons. It's all the same, So I would like it to be outside of our like financial issues and our rights being fought with studios. And I think that's the first step, is understanding what goes into it. And I'm always more than happy to educate people on that. I'm always more than happy to explain. Like, my girlfriend's dad calls me on a regular basis and texts me and asks, like, what is this union thing that's happening? And I'm like, okay, Steve, let's sit down and I'll tell you what's going on with our unions. And like, he loves to listen, and most people do love to learn and they're interested. And I think that we've somehow, whether it's the introvertedness or just kind of like the frustration of like people just kind of going, oh, you just draw something in a computer, we've been separated from, one, the audience, the viewers, and two, the rest of Hollywood. Just because people will talk to me like, oh, well, writers do this, like comedy writers, they make really funny, like they write stuff. And I'm like, okay, well, I do that too. And like, no, you draw the stuff. I'm like, no, but I'm also a comedy writer. I don't write scripts. I make up scenes and scenarios and I execute it. And I have funny ideas too. And people are always like, oh, okay, I thought you just drew the funny pictures to go with it. I'm like, no, I change entire scenes. Like, they could give me a script and I can change the whole thing and pitch a whole new joke. And people don't realize that because there's a visual aspect to comedy, and you're just not thinking about it. Because you shouldn't. If you're enjoying it, you should just be like, that was a great scene, and move on. But I think that there needs to be some new form appreciation for like us as human beings and understanding our craft, our labor.
So we said that the genie is not getting back into the bottle with AI. You talked about what you're hoping to see to get in the future. Being on the inside, though, where do you feel like the trends are going to go in terms of the technology, how it's going to influence how shows are made, and how maybe that will affect your type of role moving into the future for people who are wanting to get into it?
It's scary. I think it's like a huge unknown for a lot of us because it's like when we were going from like corded phones to cell phones, we wouldn't have ever imagined something like the iPhone as in our pockets every single day. So it's hard because it moves quickly and we can't see how it's going to go. But all I know is that we will always have our strength in numbers with unions. And with this big writer strike win, there's a lot of we believe that we can fight back on now. And I think it's really empowered a lot of people. But like I said before, it's like there's so much adapting in what I do that it's who knows. I know there's going to be a lot of like head ass stupid ideas from executives. They're like, what if we, I mean, that already exists. And I don't want to out any studio or any production, but I've done like takes on IPs and I've sat down with someone and like I've heard the worst ideas ever from executives, and they're like, we want to make a show where this blank does blank, and you're like, oh my god. They're like, what if we had dinosaurs that turned into tacos? Wouldn't that be funny and good? And I'm looking down like all of these people I know who are so funny and so smart and so talented, who have amazing ideas, who have been turned away at the door over and over and over again, who are just geniuses, and like even people I've mentioned before, like creative, famous people in my own industry that people outside my industry don't know are famous. And you have studios being like, what if we had this, like, what if cows could skateboard? Can you make that a show? And that's what it's going to be, is it's going to be that, but it's going to be a machine coming up with it or whatever. And I see a lot of us fixing things and fighting a lot more than we've ever had to fight. Like I said about if they made AI storyboard something, I could see my entire week going into overtime work just fixing stuff. So there's going to be a ton of fixing, a ton of fighting, a ton of pushback until this little like AI trend kind of dies down, and then we actually collectively figure out how to implement this in a helpful way instead of just excitedly being like, we have a robot that makes things. And it's like, okay, we do. But it's like, that's how the whole entire industry in the world is doing. Like, the robot makes pictures. We got to do something with the pictures. And it's just like so hyper and forced on us that it's not even fleshed out yet. And they're just pushing it. And that all the CEOs, all the studios will do that until we get them to calm down a bit. And then we can go, okay, now what can we make the robot do?
I love it. Well, April, my next and kind of one of our final questions as we wrap up here is what's in the near future for April Davis? You said you're working on some shorts. This is exciting. What can we expect from April Davis in the near future?
So I have a couple of shorts that are coming out with a Studio Digital, which is a subset of Bento Box Animation, which is a subset of Fox and the big Russian nesting doll of things. And those are things that I wrote, directed, animated, designed. And I want to say like sometime next week the first one will come out, but I have not gotten a solid deadline, except that the first one's finished and I've already handed it off to them, so why wouldn't they? But and then I don't know, because I'm also looking at we could end up striking in July. So even if I get a really good contract right after I finish this, that's why I've moved on to like tattoo apprenticeship, trying to find something else as a backup plan. And that's something I recommend for any Hollywood entertainment industry people listening. Is my side gig was I train and work with horses on set, and my horse is an animal actor. But when your side gigs are also in the same industry that your main gig is, it's not good when it all goes underwater. So that's why I've moved on to
Oh
tattooing, which
man.
is something it's like I already have an interest in and enjoy, and it's something that would be a nice fallback when I don't have a contract or hiatus. But just like everyone else, we're just kind of like sitting on the $3 we have and go, I don't know, I'm just gonna keep making stuff and hope that someone gives me money for it.
It's a
So
tenuous time out there. Sorry.
yeah. So where can people find you online if they want to see some of your artwork or all the things you're working on?
I'm Pinkie Tunes on pretty much everything, Instagram and Twitter X, mostly for my art stuff. And then for all of my horse stuff and social media things, I'm Ye Hollywood on like YouTube and TikTok and Instagram. And I tag, if you find one, you'll find the other. I tag both accounts and everything. And the big thing I'm plugging right now is I want people to check out a Studio Digital on TikTok and Instagram, because that's where my first short is going to come out soon.
Heck yeah, we're definitely going to check that out.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, once again, April, thank you so much for joining us. I have learned so much in the last hour. I feel like I need to go down a Google rabbit hole right now. Amazing work you've been doing. Having this voice, sharing this knowledge about unions, about the animation industry, and about how it's kind of this black hole no one really understands outside the industry. It's really eye-opening. I encourage you, keep that voice up. We absolutely, of course, will link all of your socials in the show notes here, and we'll get all this pushed out. It's been wonderful speaking with you. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you, guys. It's been super exciting to talk about stuff from like business and tech side of it, and especially have someone chime in and tell me like how things actually work, like in AI, because otherwise I'm just like, I don't know, it's a robot and it does things and it's bad. So yeah, I appreciate you guys' time. It was awesome.
Yeah, well, thank you, and thank you to everyone who's listened, and we will see you all next week. Bye-bye.